journalist, you're not only reporting on the events of the moment, you are drafting or creating the first draft of history. And so the way that we choose to tell stories as we gather more information and as we try to create the fullest picture of an event, of a moment in time, it is important to know that what we are writing, what we are reporting is a first draft of history. So why does that matter when it comes to the topic of framing? Well, when you are framing a story, you are choosing which narrative to center in the story. You are choosing whose voices are elevated in the story. You are choosing which parts of the story are more consequential or important than others, because that's a part of the editing process, right? Some things are cut out of stories. Some things are not detailed as much in a story. And so there is real power in how we choose as media to frame them. I'm thinking of a recent example in a story that we just published with my outlet. I reported on a Black educator who had been chased out of one school district to another, and then chased out of that district amid false accusations of indoctrinating children with CRT. And for the longest, this anti-CRT coverage in our state and nationwide really centered on these concepts that we never really clearly defined and really never pushed home the fact that the concepts were not for K through 12 education, yet all of these school boards were being inundated with complaints and threats and groups saying, you all are trying to indoctrinate children. And the framing for the story was always centered on concerned parents, right? Just blanket concerned parents. Although that was not the movement that we were or are dealing with now. It's not just concerned parents. It's not every parent. Black and brown parents certainly were not centered in this national discourse that tied right back to the way that we teach our history in schools. But really, we were talking about largely, and especially here in Georgia, concerned white parents, white conservatives, and it was not being reported in that way. And so what this piece does, and framing is never absent of facts, but what this piece does is center the story not only on the facts, but the how and the why that we got here and the consequences of that. And we tell that through the lens of someone who is impacted amid false claims of carrying this thing out. So that's a choice to frame it either on almost mystical concerned parents, and you don't know exactly what you're talking about. And when I say you, I'm talking about the journalists, what the concepts are that are, in the middle of this fierce national debate, this battle, instead of centering it on these people every time in every story without proper explanation and context. We take a wider look at these things. And that's important. Historical context is important. We will never understand the times that we're in if we don't report about how we have been here before. That can go on into reporting on these curriculum battles. Something we grappled with in the past year were the threats made against historically Black colleges and universities and the impact it had on our learning. And what we talked about in class was how this method of disruption, these threats, specifically bomb threats, are not new. There's history here, and it's a history of disruption, and it happens during certain eras in our history when we're grappling with the same discourse about race and democracy and voting rights and progression in the country. And so it's important in our storytelling to include that type of context. As journalists, you're not only reporting on the events of the moment, you are drafting or creating the first draft of history.